title of my talk, Everywhere I Go, even though the content is always different. So I have been presenting at different tech or art conferences, but also when I present to kindergarten or kids, I have the same title. And the reason is because over my throughout my journey and in my life, I was always seeking harmony. Like I was looking for that balance between creativity and technology, between being stuck in the past and looking to the future. And this is inspired by some lyrics from Eminem, Snap Back to Reality, Here Comes Gravity. And it is connected a bit through my life. Like, I started as a dreamer. I'm from Oradea, like a beautiful town. And since I was a kid, I was really interested on how things work, but I was always dreaming too much, and I couldn't focus a lot on, just getting too deep into making sense of things and putting them together. And I was really fascinated by my grandma. She lives in Maramureș in the north. She had many kids, and she had a really hard life, but she had this crazy wisdom and ability to read people. And when I was a kid, I was like, how the hell is she doing that? What's like the math algorithm behind it? Is like, is she looking to some patterns? Is it like something with the eyes, with the face, with the expressions? So as a kid, I was trying to understand that, so I was reading a few books on cognitive science and expressions, reading emotions. And when I finished high school, I told my parents that I'm going to Copenhagen to study engineering, but in reality, I want to do music, which snap back to reality, here comes gravity. I became homeless. So I was sleeping in the airport for about 2 months, playing guitar in different blues bars in Copenhagen. And I was still a dreamer. I thought, I'll be a rock star. First, I wanted to be a rabbi or something like that, then a shepherd in the mountains. So I was trying to see what would work out with my dreams, and like trying to understand how to understand human emotions and being able to work some solutions and tools for the betterment of humanity. I was really interested in human-centric design, being able to understand our mind, our body, and then react to it. So I worked a lot with perception. But then I met some other dreamers, and sorry for the bad pictures, the only picture I found with the three of them together. These guys are the founders of Unity, the game engine that sits behind probably 85% of all the mobile games out there, VR experiences, automotive simulations, aerospace. And they wanted to create tools and democratize tools for dreamers and creatives to be able to articulate and develop different experiences. So I grew up next to them, and I was that nagging student. I was like, hey, I want to learn. Just let me try out your technology. I was really good at math, but I was also good at making up demos and prototypes just to showcase how the technology works. And I was always interested in how do I push limits. In everything I do, I always wanted to push the boundaries of what's possible or not. So in that space, in my university, which I do think it was a magical space, we had designers, architects, developers, and ex-Nokia employees. When I started, Nokia was firing people, like a big giant that kind of saw the dawn of technology progress because they were not prepared, they were not dreaming enough maybe. But they're really good at what they were doing. And I was fascinated to just be in the same room with world experts that invented things that we've been using for so many years. And I was thinking, I want to be an expert too. So I looked a lot into creating user experience and using these tools to, improve interfaces of the things that we're using, voice-based AI agents or phone screens, VR headsets. And I saw something around eye tracking in a paper, and immediately I connected this with the dream I had when I was inspired by my grandma. And I was like, okay, this might actually work. I could translate all the research I'd done in cognitive science and actually improve this technology. VR was just starting. in those years, like really clunky, expensive prototypes. We've been using them in automotive, in architecture. They're really expensive and not portable. So I was thinking, what if I get inspired by the way our brain and perception works and develop this technology that I will only render to the biggest clarity the things I'm looking at, and everything else I will compress. So we won't need as much computational power to do it. So I started to put eye tracking in everything, like smartwatches, tablets. I hacked Fruit Ninja so you could play with your eyes. We showed this to Richard Branson at CES. It was a success because the human eye is the fastest organ in our body, and it's like incredible what we can do with the eye. But then in the same time, like the proverbs that I was reading from my grandma, and like, you know, the notion of the eye being the mirror to the soul, I started to dig into emotions, not only using eye tracking for interaction, but how do I understand the user? And I started to develop a series of patterns, like I can detect if you guys are actually listening to me or daydreaming. And that's super simple to do, which over the years it became a really valuable technology in cars. Like when people are driving and your mind is wandering off, that can be super dangerous because a split of a second can cause an accident. Then I can detect if you'll have an epileptic seizure in the next 5 minutes. Again, super valuable in the car context, where if I would detect that and somebody driving a car, the car could pull over and, you know, take you to safety. So as I always like to jam and combine things, Lego was just across the street as well. So I started to knock at their door and say, hey, I'm working with Unity. I have this eye tracking technology. I want to do something for my research, but with the Star Wars franchise from Lego. So they said, okay, build us a demo and show how you can, you know, be a Jedi. So basically, I was reading human mind with brainwaves and using eye tracking to create this demo for Lego to be able to think when to shoot rockets or deflect, you know, like the lightsaber, and focus with your eye on the different targets. Everything was amazing on paper in research, but then I had to do this demo for 2,000 Danish kids. They couldn't stand still. These systems required calibrations. It required a lot of fine-tuning. So then again, snap back to reality, here comes gravity. Real life happens. You know, I didn't anticipate that I had to do that to work for kids. But that brought us a lot of attention, and a few years after, Facebook acquired our company. It was a really painful situation. We were happy. I never anticipated that we will get to that point, but I only saw this in movies. I didn't know what to expect. When people told me, okay, you need some lawyers, I panicked because, you know, lawyers have bad connotations. Like I didn't do anything wrong. And I learned the hard way how to work with these things and with technology. So I moved to Silicon Valley for a while to be really close to Facebook and actually closing the deal. The team continued to work in reality labs at Facebook, but I never wanted them to use the patents in consumer headsets. So, like David and Goliath, I started a lawsuit with Facebook 3 years ago. Now we're friends, we're okay. But back then I was naive and thinking that, okay, I can stop a giant to use collecting data and emotions to be able to target to certain ads and, you know, on different devices to understand what you have in your room, what you're feeling when you look at your own furniture, and then what ads to pop up there. I thought that's like a really dark scenario and I didn't want to get there. So I tried to stop them, but at the same time I got sick of technology. So I moved back to Copenhagen and I started to work with fashion. Said, well, I do like to tell stories, and I do like to build worlds and narratives and characters. So I tried for a few years to work with a few fashion designers in Copenhagen, because my question when I arrived there was like, where are the Vikings? Because when I moved to Copenhagen, everyone was wearing skinny jeans and Vans shoes, and I was like, I don't see any Viking element in the aesthetics and fashion and architecture. So I dig deep into those symbols and elements, and I tried to include them in some, yeah, concepts that we were doing. But in the same time, I realized the exactly same work I was doing when I was building these experiences for VR. I was creating a space, I was creating a user interaction, I was writing with a character, with scripts. But then Volvo asked me, hey, you're the eye tracking guy. Can you build some simulators for us? Because we want to see how does the trust between the human and machine will evolve, especially when the machine or the car will take more and more of the responsibility from you. What can the users do in that time, and how can they trust the system? So they wanted to include some of my technologies there. They said that I should go and be in their lab for 2 months. Snap back to reality, here comes gravity, 10 years later, still there, trying to escape. Now I'm joking. But I told you this story because if you saw a bit my journey, I was always seeking harmony. I was looking, where do I belong? Am I a creative or am I a nerd? Am I stuck in the past and nostalgic, or am I a dreamer and trying to shape the future? And I found that super good intersection point where I do think magic happens. That's where innovation happens. I did learn that you need a box to think outside a box. And I started to learn my boxes really well, like automotive industry, architecture, 3D design, physics. So I had to learn them to break them, because the artist in me is always looking for imperfections. I do like good systems, I do like to work with AI, build AI agents, simulations, seek perfection, but I'm always seeking the in-between. I think that's where innovation happens again, those imperfect places and spaces that makes us humans and makes things beautiful. I did learn how to move from vision to solution, because dreams gives you discipline, vision gives you purpose. Purpose is passion, passion is endurance. How much are you willing to go through what you're doing, all the fights, all the setbacks to actually make something big? And also how you're articulating your vision for others to follow and being involved with you. Another aspect is a dream comes with a lot of activities, like in Proverbs 22, if I remember from my grandma. It's like that you need to write a vision with big letters so you can see it when you run with it. And that's a really interesting proverb, because when we are rushing a lot to do something and achieve a vision, we might get lost in the details. And I know that big things require a lot of work. It does require to go through a lot of iterations, imperfections to get there. And also, one of most important things, it's like deciding what not to do. That was a hard lesson for me, because when I saw myself with some tools in my head, I was looking for problems. I thought that everything can be solved with eye tracking, with VR, with AI. But then I learned that if you put all the art in the world in the biggest room, you'll have the biggest art warehouse, not the biggest museum. Museum, it's about curatorship. It's about deciding what not to put in the wall. And that notion helped me so much in my life to get that harmony, like to understand how do I balance strategy and tactics, the big dreams with what I can do now. So this is me in 3D in the metaverse. That's how I started at Volvo, and I'll give you a quick glimpse on the things that we were doing. I was never a car person. Like, I was always passionate about guitars. My dad always asked me, hey, let's open the hood, look at the engine. I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not interested. But then I had this moment when my dad visited me in Sweden at the Volvo headquarters, and I was driving this concept car, and I could tell my dad, hey, I built this button, and maybe 5 million people will press it. And when I said that, everything made sense to me. It's like, imagine that we can create all these innovations, take all these dreams, put them into good solutions, and I could potentially save 5 million lives. And imagine if we can actually give those technologies for other industries and, like, focus on the details and the dreams we have to get to bigger and grander things. But then that, of course, brought us a lot of attention when we built all these VR systems, simulation, eye tracking with Volvo. So for me, I got into a point that scared me. Everything that I dreamt about was happening. And that suddenly gave me like, I felt a lot of responsibility on my back. And I was like, okay, where does it stop? Let me take a few steps back and understand the systems around me and move from just my dream to our collective dream. What does make culture? Instead of just reading emotions, how do I change emotion? So again, as you see, always the struggle between the artist and the technologist, from solutions to asking better questions to solve better problems. So that's when I realized that, yeah, maybe it's time to detach from technology, from understanding emotions, from research, to create art instead, to actually change human emotion that could help with changing culture in the future and the way we relate to each other with the societal technological changes that are happening. So I stole these slides from a good friend of mine. He was working with NASA and SpaceX for a while with astronaut training. And this is an area that I was really interested in, especially when working with emotion. It's like, what does create cognitive dissonance? That element that when you're expecting something to happen, but it acts in a different way, which alters our perception or our knowledge about the things around us. So the way dissonance, cognitive dissonance works is that we have a set of actions, but there is an inconsistency with the knowledge we have about that thing, and that makes you feel weird. So with the technology that we've been using with VR and AI, we are trying to see how can we trick the brain the fastest. What are those elements and senses that we can take into account to trick the human brain? But then we are putting all the pieces together, and we were moving from learning to understanding. I was really inspired by another friend of mine, Neri Oxman. She's a researcher at MIT Media Lab. She's an architect, biologist, fashion designer, technologist, professor. She's been in military. She's a designer and writer, so she can do everything. And I was thinking that's how the idea of the Point Labs or the Dream Incubator that I built came to life. It's why, how do we look into nature and through science convert what we do into knowledge? And then from knowledge, through engineering, make it into utility. And that's what I did for most of my career, the right-hand side of this figure. But then it's like, how do I nudge emotion? So through design, from utility to change human behavior. Okay, if we move past the human, how do we get to change culture? And that's through art. We don't need more technology, we need better stories to articulate the future that we all want to live in. So how does the collective imaginated futures look like? So then I went to Hollywood. I wanted to understand how do we build worlds in fictional worlds. So I asked a friend of mine, it's a friend of mine now, we were not friends before, on how do we build worlds? How do we understand futures, speculation, design? How do we articulate really, really in detail the future we want to live in? Alex was behind Minority Report, Black Mirror, Fight Club, and a few other movies. And what's interesting with these movies, especially Minority Report, in '95, they filed over 120 patents that are associated with this movie, including Siri, voice assistants, augmented reality, gesture control interfaces, self-driving cars, and different type of 3D VR elements. The way we're building worlds is to look at different areas of the world and what makes stories. So every world has governance, culture, infrastructure, ecology, resources, and economy. And all those circles are lenses and research spaces that we can look to, create systems of systems. The things that we interact with the moment we walk out the house till the moment we go to sleep. Everything is connected. Like, how is policies affecting the way we are adopting AI? How is the resources consumed when we are interacting with technology in a different way. So having these elements together, I was wondering, what's next? And I will end up with this. In February, almost on my birthday, we collaborated with SpaceX and Ouch Studio from Istanbul. And we work with a few institutes like CERN, NASA, to actually do something that's on the intersection of engineering, art, design, and science. We took the brightest scientists, we took all the data we know about the human DNA and the observable universe, and we made this sculpture, generative AI sculpture, that was sent on the moon on the 12th of February, so it's the first art piece on the moon. It's there now. It was sent with the Infinity rover. And in a few museums in the world, we were able to experience it through some VR headsets. So now we're in talks with MoMA Museum. 2 weeks ago, we premiered it at the Cannes Festival, where we are reading your emotions, and the art piece on the moon changes real time. It's an art manifest, it's an engineering exercise, where what we were actually looking at was like, how can we send a lot of video data to the moon between the Earth and moon, but instead of just sending random videos, we wanted to create this artistic manifest where we try to intersect art, science, engineering, and design. This, of course, we're trying to do a second chapter because, as I said, I'm always dreaming for something more, so after the moon, we're looking for something else. But for me, what this taught me a lot is, like, again, seeking that intersection point, trying to understand that instead of just seeking this efficiency and looking for utility, we often forget to be empathic with each other. And like, we can now, with better understanding, see how these things connect. How are we creating a better society? How is collective imaginated futures with AI affecting our culture? How are we intersecting and communicating with each other? And yeah, that was for me. Thank you very much.